Before we start, it is highly recommended that viewers exercise caution. The following is solely for educational and amusement purposes. This is the exact federal inner-city press reports that the Sean Diddy Combs trial's courtroom evidence took place in a crowded courtroom that had previously been shaken by explosive testimony. Leonardo DiCaprio, a Hollywood icon known for his blockbuster films and environmental activism, took the stand, and nobody anticipated what he said next. Activism. DiCaprio disclosed a difficult period of his life that most people could not have predicted. His voice faltered as he recounted a single evening invitation from Sean Diddy Combs that altered his perception of famous gatherings. Diddy Combs revealed something far more sinister than champagne and cameras. In addition to shocking the jury, Leonardo's revelation sparked a media frenzy that made even the most powerful people confront the truth. What did he witness, and why did he remain silent for a long time? What does this signify for Diddy's trial going forward? The courtroom stillness was oppressive. Cameras were not permitted. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps feverishly, typing on laptops in an attempt to keep up with the story. But it didn't matter because the world was watching. Of the decade. And then, without everyone noticing, Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the most well-known actors in the world, walked into the room. Clad in a dark suit, and gasps reverberated throughout the gallery as he approached the witness stand with a visibly frightened face and careful, unhurried strides. This wasn't a cameo. This wastes stimony. When the court requested silence, DiCaprio sat, inhaled, and looked straight across the room at Sean Diddy Combs. What transpired next wasn't a performance. It was an admission of terror about what he witnessed at a private party that Diddy himself had once brought him to. "I've gone to a lot of," he said, "weird parties in Hollywood," in a calm but aloof voice. But this one was different. It was planned. He explained a secret. DiCaprio acknowledged that he was intrigued by the secluded, protected estate with locked access and guests arriving by private aircraft. "I assumed it would be a gorgeous A-list property, but what I entered was something quite different." According to DiCaprio, the party began like any other celebrity networking event: champagne, security, high-end cuisine, and other upscale events. But as the evening wore on, he started to notice some things that didn't feel quite right. He said people who appeared too young to be drinking were present in rooms that guests were not permitted to enter, and there was a noticeable tension in the air. "I felt as though I had entered." He acknowledged that it was a place I shouldn't be, and then he revealed the shocking information. There was a rear room I wasn't supposed to view, a cracked door, and people in queue with cameras. And Diddy was there issuing commands. The gallery gasped. It was no longer a party. It was something deeper and planned. Diddy sat still. With his legal team on his side, the court granted a brief break as rumors became news, and DiCaprio's evidence had just broken the curtain. That encircled Diddy's inner circle, and this was just the start. Following the break, Leonardo DiCaprio came back to the stage looking even more determined. When I saw the back room, he knew that what he was going to tell would put him at the center of one of the most unsettling revelations in the entire case. Stated, "I didn't know if what I was seeing was illegal, but I knew it wasn't right. Some of the people inside were apprehensive as they watched the cameras. They weren't having fun. They were being observed." He mentioned a girl sitting on a red velvet couch who couldn't have been older than 20. When I briefly caught her, sight among a bunch of considerably older men, DiCaprio added, "And in that glance, she looked terrified." His voice cracked, and the courtroom hung on his every word. I couldn't get that expression out of my head. Leo went on to explain how the party security was oddly combative and that guests weren't permitted to, "You had to stay in the public zones," he added. And there were security men, some with earpieces and some without, who would politely ask questions or wander around, but forcefully reroute you if you attempted to investigate. However, the behavior was what was prohibited, not simply the rooms. By midnight, DiCaprio claimed, he began witnessing people vanish for extended periods of time. He recognized celebrities who abruptly stopped appearing and then reappearing with a pale or confused appearance. It wasn't simply a party. I kept hearing that individuals were being processed. Leonardo claimed that when he sought to leave early, he was informed that his driver had been delayed. The courtroom was stunned. When he insisted, "A man in a Mr. DiCaprio," the black suit remarked gently, pulling him aside. "We respect you too much for you to walk out like this." "Please allow us to take you to the lounge," Leo said. They stated it as if it were a luxury, but it seemed as a warning. He spent more than an hour sitting in a glass-walled room with a barman who never talked and quiet jazz music playing. "Eventually, I never told anyone," he confessed, "because I didn't think anyone would believe me, but now that I see what's I have to come out." The court gave a somber nod, and Diddy's attorney scrawled notes frantically. What DiCaprio was asked how he perceived what he saw behind the velvet curtain, which was not a party but rather a machine with people within as its moving components. It became particularly weird when Diddy reacted to his presence that evening. Leo responded, "Because as I was going to exit that back area, Diddy noticed me just." The actor recalled an intense glare that wasn't rage or even astonishment, but rather something else entirely. "He looked at me for a moment, and I swear, as if I knew too much." Leonardo acknowledged that he hadn't recognized the gravity of that moment until later, when others he knew were more calculating. "As if he was storing me in his head," stated softly. "It felt like something invisible pushed me out of certain rooms when film projects stalled and when calls went unanswered. However, he purposefully started running into members of that party again at award ceremonies and galas, and they would give me this weird look as if we had all been." Mark Leo claimed that he began to have dreams about that place. He attempted to dismiss it and explain it away, saying that perhaps it was just a strange Hollywood story. However, after seeing the accusations, Cassie's narrative, the tapes, and the disappearances, he received an anonymous phone at that point, and they realized "You saw more than you should have?" "Let it die, Leo," the caller stated during the party before hanging up. He never told anyone, not even his closest friends, his publicist, or his agency, until now. The courtroom was filled, with astonished quiet as the prosecution inquired, when he asked him one last time, "Why come forward now?" DiCaprio turned to face Diddy and replied, "Because nobody is too big to fall, not even you." And with that, one of Hollywood's biggest stars just assisted in overthrowing one of the most influential and feared men in the music industry. The prosecution changed their focus in the courtroom, focusing on Leonardo DiCaprio's every word. They asked him a question that caused his hands to visibly. DiCaprio nodded slowly. "But I didn't want to know," he replied. "Did anyone ever tell you what was going on behind those closed doors? In any case, he told me that a fellow actor, whose identity was kept secret in court for security reasons, drew him aside a few days following the actor remarked, "You were fortunate to leave early. Control blackmail is one of the things that goes on at those parties, and it goes far beyond drugs or alcohol and lists." Leo, who was clearly upset, described how he informed me that there was a list, a genuine one, of all the people who'd ever been captured on camera or compromised within that mansion. It was employed to ensure that everyone remained silent, compliant, and in contact with Diddy. In quiet, Leo disclosed that following this discussion, he started to observe how many favors were exchanged rather than money. The courtroom gasped. People he knew who weren't often in the same social circles, producers, directors, influencers, and others, were suddenly supporting his initiatives and attending his events with a smile on their faces as if nothing had happened. But the most terrifying part was when Leo explained the design of I discovered that Diddy's home had been remodeled, not to make it larger, but to create secret rooms, camera control centers, and areas where no one could ever go, discussed and cited designs he had seen circulated among a group chat of industry insiders who were concerned, but he did not display the plans in. DiCaprio claims that the prosecution's plan to present evidence that supports Leo's assertions was the true goal of the parties. Was surveillance more than social? And they wanted to test how far people would go when they believed no one would find out. But someone always did. After Leo completed outlining the list and the mansion's secret infrastructure, the judge requested a 15-minute break, during which Diddy sat silently at the defense table. Jaw clenched, but for the first time, he appeared vulnerable rather than strong. When the court reopened after the break, the prosecutor stood up and questioned DiCaprio, Mr. DiCaprio, a question that instantly changed the mood of the room. Have you ever spoken to somebody you thought was being detained there against their will? Then he nodded, saying, I was looking for a toilet. His brows narrowed as I went farther than I should have, entered a door and began walking down a... He described the narrow, murky hallway below the main floor that was lined with storage doors, and I heard him sobbing. At the very end of the hallway was a small chamber. I raised the tinted glass panel to reveal a girl sitting on the floor, knees to her breast, sobbing. Leo stated the girl appeared to be no older than 18, Dara crack, so I asked her if she was all right. She glanced up in fear and shook her head, and then a security guard came up behind me and slammed the door. Leo remembered the man's precise words. Wrong floor, Mr. DiCaprio. You didn't see anything. Go back upstairs. He closed and told me that I wasn't permitted down there. Later, he attempted to report it, but as he informed the court, no one would do so. Not even my own team, no studio, and no media outlet. Following weeks of emotional upheaval, he experienced flashbacks, lost, focus on his career, and avoided public gatherings for nearly a year. He claimed to be preoccupied with figuring out who she was, but it seemed as though she didn't exist. No press, no records. And that's when Leo realized there was something much more significant. When asked whether he thought Diddy was real, he responded solemnly, someone had the power to erase people. And if they could do that, they could do anything. It wasn't just his house, it was his design, Leo said, acknowledging the basement. Nothing happened there without his approval. The jury was frozen, DiCaprio said, was more than simply a witness. He was speaking for dozens, if not hundreds, of people who were never given the opportunity to do so. This was the day's last testimony, took an unexpected turn when DiCaprio was asked by the prosecution if he recognized the term lighthouse in connection with Diddy's incidents. The crowd fell silent and DiCaprio nodded. Everyone who attended those parties understood what that code name meant, he continued. He explained how the term surfaced one evening in a private conversation that was only discussed among individuals who were invited to the highest echelons of his inner circle. Speaking with a senior music executive, he informed me, "You've visited the lighthouse. You now understand its significance." When asked why it was called that, DiCaprio replied, "Because you could see everything from within it, and once you couldn't turn back once you saw it." The bit that nobody anticipated was when Leo was asked if he had ever seen Diddy. Speaking with any prominent political leaders at these gatherings, he inhaled and then uttered, "Barack Obama." The courtroom, he explained, "I never saw Obama in the home, but I did see him engage with Diddy at fundraisers for the campaign, private after-parties, and at least once, I witnessed Diddy giving an envelope to someone in Obama's inner circle. It was subtle, but it wasn't insignificant. It's hard to believe someone that powerful didn't hear the whispers," he said, adding that he didn't think Obama was directly involved in any misconduct. "Don't let Diddy bring the lighthouse to DC and everyone," Leo recalled a joke made at an occasion in 2016. Leo clarified, "I don't think Obama ever went to the mansion, but I think he knew. And if he did, he laughed except Obama, who apparently just smiled and left right away." The ramifications were damning, not only for Diddy but also for the network surrounding him, and he was unaware that he didn't want to know. DiCaprio took a deep breath as the prosecution asked him why he had not come out earlier. "Because I was scared," he replied, "not just for my career, for my own life." "The girl in the basement, the threats the lighthouse whispers after that night in the mansion," Leo remarked. "You think I'm being paranoid? He went home and didn't talk to anybody for days. I didn't sleep, I kept the lights on, and I had security. Check my house for bugs." In Hollywood, paranoia is a survival tactic. He acknowledged that in the years that followed, he made multiple attempts to warn those in positions of authority. "There's something sinister going on behind the scenes," I said over a meal with a studio head. "If we don't take action." "You want to be in The Revenant or not?" he asked, staring me in the eye. Leo claims that every time he attempted to voice his opinions, even in little ways, he was confronted with threats or silent warnings. One producer said to him, "They'll cancel you, and you won't even know who did it. If you say something bad about Diddy, you'll be uninsurable overnight." but it was an episode in 2021 that drove him to the brink. "I was on a yacht in Capri," Mai claimed, referring to a small group of close pals. "I believe that someone had mentioned the lighthouse once more. They stated, 'It's back. He's starting again.'" That evening, Leo excused himself and made his way to the yacht's edge, considering jumping. "I had spent years grinning on red carpets and acting as though nothing had happened, collecting honors while being aware that someone was still confined and suffering because I remained silent and he didn't jump. But he made a pledge I made that. I would testify at all costs if this man ever had to answer for what he had done." The courtroom was filled with startled stillness. It was too late when Diddy shifted uneasily at the defense table and whispered to his attorney that Leonardo DiCaprio was no longer a Hollywood celebrity. "Is that the file?" DiCaprio's expression changed when the prosecution showed him a sealed manila envelope, but he wasn't finished yet. He inquired softly, and the lawyer nodded. Leo clarified, "This file includes notes, screenshots, and messages that I gathered over. He was never intended to have the file, according to his evidence, based on the years of people contacting me anonymously from victims and those present." In 2019, a former assistant to a powerful record executive presented it to him. She was trembling when she handed it to me, saying, "If I disappear, give this to someone who is unstoppable." I questioned, "Why me?" She replied, "Because you still possess a soul." The court-described file contained party security log transcripts. Names of Leo declined to give the majority of the identities of the minors who were purportedly observed entering Diddy's estate and never leaving in public. One person came out directly, but her identity was withheld because she deserves privacy, while others are still attempting to live their lives and others are still too afraid to speak. However, DiCaprio termed her hope. She claimed to have spent 3 months in Diddy's care after being trafficked through contacts in the celebrity sector. Leo read aloud one of her letters before fleeing through what she claimed was a favor from a guilty friend. "If anyone ever finds out what he did to us, I just want someone to speak out loud about what happened, even if no one believes it." DiCaprio then turned to face the judge and responded, "That's why I'm here." He concluded his statement by stating that he thought Did's empire was constructed not just on music but also on silence, shame, and terror. The man claimed that he could dance, but the shadows moved with him. You must see the judge called for another brief break, but the courtroom remained motionless, and nobody, not even the defense, spoke. When the jury returned, it was clear that Diddy had become very pale as the environment changed, and while his staff shuffled files and one lawyer angrily muttered in his ear, Diddy slammed a fist over the table, then rose, and Diddy's lawyer asked to go to the bench, with the judge's permission. A quick sidebar followed, and nobody knows what was said, but the prosecution stood when the lawyers went back to their seats and asked Leonardo to make one more remark. Leonardo cleared his throat and said, "I'm not here because I'm here because I believe in responsibility and light, even though I despise Sherlock Holmes." He paused, saying, "This trial isn't about Hollywood or fame. It's about a system that for decades allowed one man to do whatever he pleased because he was wealthy, powerful, and threatening. It's about the individuals he harmed while the rest of us." Leonardo turned to face Diddy after turning away. "You once told me that people just care about the party, but now that it's done, it was time to tidy up the mess." When the room became quiet, Diddy whispered something into a courtroom microphone. "This ain't over none," he said. Leo retorted quietly. "Then you finally understand what it's like to be an actor. All of this is real." Reporters hurried out as the judge adjourned court for the day, saying, "Only this time you don't get a script in one of my films." As Leonardo DiCaprio left the courtroom under police escort, the jury sat motionless and Diddy appeared helpless for the first time in a long time, past a small group of spectators, some of whom cheered and others who simply stared in shock. However, everyone's belief in him or were unaware of the trial's altered. So